Good morning once again. This is the voice of the people, 96.1 FM. That is the station you're tuned into at the moment. And my name is Gesire Agua. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's a Tuesday, the 9th of July, 2024. And today on the arena, we're checking out a particular story that is very, very important. Once again, we have presidential spokesman Bayo Nanuga deleting his tweets announcing federal government's policies to bring down food prices. He told People's Gazette that the memo on tariffs on rice, other food items, was still under consideration and was shared in error, and the policy was mistakenly circulated. Mr. Bayo Nanuga told the Gazette by telephone that they're still deliberating internationally from the Agric Ministry to other agencies on how best to proceed with the policy. Mr. Onaniga apologized for the error and said the government was not oblivious to its potential impact on long-suffering Nigerians. This is what he said. And this is also looking at the fact that sometime in May, towards April 30th, May 1st, the presidential aide Bayo Nanuga deleted his tweet after the shipping giant Maersk denied plans of investing $600 million in Nigeria's port sector. In a statement released by the presidential aide, which Onaniga shared on X, it was claimed that the investment was secured during a World Economic Forum meeting in Riyadh over the weekend. It was disclosed that AP Mola chairman Robert had discussed the investment with President Tinubu on the sidelines of a meeting discussing energy development and growth. Well, that happened to be fake when the chairman Robert talked about the fact that no investments of such was discussed at that moment. Right now, where the crux of the conversation this morning is looking at competencies and what it says about a particular individual when you surround yourself with people who are not competent or competent. Well, Tony Elumelu recently posted a tweet. He said, "Talent I don't have. I surround myself with people who have it. You must recognize your limitations, but make sure you are intelligent enough to support yourself with those who are better, those who are more intelligent in that area than yourself." Really, really profound word right there. We have Mr. Larry Ogoego on the phone this morning. Good morning, Mr. Larry, and welcome.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning, Jason. It's good to be here today. And I hope maybe as we proceed, we'll also find one or two competent persons to talk about.
Yes, that is it at this point. So, political appointments in Nigeria, are we doing it based on competence or compensation?
I think it's obviously more based on compensation and personal connection than on competence. I think that's the pattern across the board. Occasionally, very occasionally, we see a competent appointee, a flash in the pan kind of experience, but that is very occasionally. And we've not seen much of that between from the Buhari days up until now. Under Obasanjo, we had a few whiz-kids who were committed to their jobs, and Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's and all of that. And then, but as we moved further with our democratic experiment, we sank deeper into the tendency to co-travelers with positions. And that is what is also making it difficult for the Nigerian state to flourish. So yeah, we don't really appoint people on the basis of competence. It's not just the president or the presidency. It's a cultural disposition that politicians have in Nigeria. Not just politicians, even Nigerians generally think that this is my time to chop, this is my time to bless my people. And to us, blessing has been totally abused as a word. Even when people steal money, they say they have been blessed. So that is the problem we have. We've not reached that point where we understand that when we appoint competent people into positions, when we put square pegs in square holes, then we will have a nation that will bless the benefit. But what we are doing now is it might go chop with me. That's not serving us well at all.
All right, maybe we take it back a little bit and look at the Obasanjo's cabinet. He had a couple of key ministers who worked. This was a post-military era, and we're trying as much as we can to find our footing in democracy. So, can you take us through what exactly happened during the appointments, and then which of the appointees actually worked and did what? When you call competence, which of them had that competence?
Well, I think, the challenge I have with assessment of political appointees, I'm not particularly emotional about these things. That is, I don't look at things on the basis of, because the person performed well in one area, then we now say, the person did well everywhere. One of the persons that actually stand out, in fact, the only person that towered head and shoulders above the rest was Nkozo Konjiwala. Because she performed well, not only on the immediate assignments she was given, but she also did the extraordinary by managing the process that led to our deaths being written off and all of that. You can't get better than that. Of course, the issue of due process, the issue of what she brought from her international exposure to bear on the Nigerian system. Of course, when she fought corruption fought back, but it didn't deter her. At some point, she suffered the kidnap saga, all of those things to cow her. We remember the issue of financial sleaze and corruption. We remember the issue of what do they call that again, subsidy and all of that. So she's one person who not only brought knowledge and expertise to her portfolio, she also brought courage to it. One appointee that did well to the extent that she reformed an institution that was obviously totally moribund was our own dear Dora Akunyele. Most people do not actually know that NAFDAC predates Dora Akunyele's appointment. NAFDAC was there, a totally nondescript agency. It was just there. But when she took over, she brought a certain personal commitment to that job and was able to take NAFDAC to an enviable position where we can now export our drugs to certain countries, which was a no-no before. And then Nigerians have developed a lot more confidence in local drugs. At some point, actually, some of us were more confident about buying drugs from Nigeria than drugs that were manufactured abroad and imported into Nigeria, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies do cloning. Some people may not understand this expression, but they clone drugs. They don't just do fake drugs. Some of them don't have the courage to do fake drugs. So they can't bear the moral burden. So they do cloning, which has its own implications. But what we do is, we just go into the pharmacy or even what we call chemist here and buy any drug. At some point, Dora Akunyele also made it easier for us to walk into a shop and buy drugs, believing generally that it will be safe to take those drugs. Before then, you could be taking a powdered milk or calcium carbonate or chalk or whatever without any medicine at all inside it. That it was that bad. But these people did a whole lot in terms of taking the portfolio they were given and then doing wonders with it. Now, people like Rufai, for instance, a lot of people think he did well in sanitizing construction in Abuja. But one of the things that I kept saying from that time is that we live in a country where if I build a house, for instance, on water channel, somebody will come and demolish my house without asking how did I get approval to build the house, so that we can also sanction the person who approved that project. As long as we don't have people who think decisions through, we will not solve the problems. That is why if you demolish all the illegal structures and then you give it 5 years, they will spring up either in those places or elsewhere. And if you want to look at it in a strict sense, if a structure is approved by government, all the government agencies and erected, you are not supposed to call it an illegal structure. Because all the agencies that are supposed to certify that it should be there, certify that it should be there. So it's only in Nigeria that the appropriate agency will say, build a house here. And everybody will agree, yes, build the house here, build the estate here. And then tomorrow, the same government and the agencies of the same government will come and pull it down and say it is illegal. And then nobody will not ask, so how did you arrive at approving it in the first place? Who should you hold accountable? So when people just behave like a bull in a china shop and get what looks like results, and they don't think things through, I'm not impressed by that kind of leadership. And that is what we have made normal in Nigeria. That is, in fact, we applaud any kind of small result we get. We are like people who have been starving for so long that if we just get a whiff of food, we have not even eaten the food, we will start jubilating. That this food will be nice.
All right.
That's what is happening to us. And we need to change that mindset. If people are appointed and paid and rewarded, we should expect them to give us results. We should set high standards for them. We should set high standards. Even if they don't live up to it, we should compromise and come down because they're not living up to it. We should just hold our high standards until we find people who can provide the high standards.
All right, we'll go back to this talk of standards, right? What the standard is supposed to be, because what we see these days is politicians and appointees doing the bare minimum, and we applaud them for it. But we'll look at that in just a moment. Let's move on to the Yardwa. Was there anyone that stood out in that cabinet before Goodluck Jonathan dissolved that?
Yaradua, I'm looking for the shining star, but I must start by saying that Yaradua himself, megastar in the sense that he did something most leaders will not do in Nigeria. I don't miss any opportunity to thank Yaradua for having the courage to actually admit that the election that brought into power was flawed. That is uncommon in Africa, but more so in Nigeria, where you'll be celebrating and generally popping champagne that you've succeeded in winning the election willy-nilly. So I think it's important that we start by celebrating Yaradua himself. For giving us an uncommon approach to leadership. Beyond what he said, that he also went ahead to set up a panel that was hopefully going to change the narrative. Of course, death didn't allow us to see, to reap the full benefits of all of that. But I'm looking for a star there that I can say that performed brilliantly without blemish. And unfortunately, I can't find any for now. But if I recall any, because there's a way I do these things. My own parameter is simple. Like I said, if you pass one aspect of the exam, that doesn't mean you've passed all. So for me, like when I thought about Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, you could see that she had an A full stop. I mean, not just in one small aspect. She did exceedingly and abundantly above. Unfortunately, the work she did has been wiped out by irresponsible and incompetent political leaders. We are indebted all over. I mean, so how do you even go back and ask for debt relief again? I mean, it's funny. Then we were doing so, everybody was like, yes, this is a good time to help Nigeria flourish. But she did the legwork, did everything, did the thinking, only for us to find ourselves here again. Sad. But that is also why we should look for team members that do brilliantly well, because most of the people who played for the Yaradua first 11, for me, they are missing in action in terms of getting the giants of
Okay.
the game. I can't find any.
Okay, so we have this behavior of looking at federal character, especially as regards appointments. I know that it's good for ensuring that every single person is represented in the cabinet and all that. But when it comes to competence, how important is federal character in the conversation? Should it even be a thing to be looked at? Because during Obasanjo's administration, some people were complaining that a majority of his appointees were Christian and some other, fewer were Muslim. During Buhari's administration, we had a lot of complaints talking about the fact that, he selected more northerners. So, as regards competence, right, where does federal character and where you're from, what religion you worship at, where does it come in?
Assuming we have been able to attain nationhood, assuming we have been able to reach that point where we don't look at tribe and tongue, according to your old new anthem, or old new anthem. To that point where we don't look at tribe and tongue and use as a parameter for every assessment we make, then we can appoint people strictly on the basis of competence. But let me also say that it's a very sensitive question, because there is no reason that is cogent enough to jettison competence. So what I have always recommended is simple. If you want to appoint people into offices, make sure that you find competent people from different locations. The only thing that you have to look harder, there is no geographical zone that doesn't have competent people in different areas. But if you have a person who is obviously head and shoulders above the others in competence, because this word competence is also relative. I mean, it's like an exam. So if someone scores 80%, that's a brilliant student. But if another scores 95%, that's far more brilliant. By 15%, that's a wide margin. Another could score 99%, that is excellent, 100% excellent. You don't say because you want to do federal character, you go and say, this person scores 75%, so he's good. When you have a 95%, what I think we should do is to be flexible. In other words, assuming you're a president and you want to appoint ministers, you have to look for from different locations. So assuming you want to make, you ask yourself the simple question, okay, so this is a good candidate, but do we have, and then we assume that this particular position should be given to this region of the country. But somebody now says, we think that there's another person from another region that may be better than Gesi. So you sit down and actually analyze the two candidates. That's why you're a president or a governor. You have resources. Well, after analyzing the two candidates, you can say, okay, fine, Gates still tops the chart, so Gates remains. And you go to Ministry maybe of Defense, and you get this general, and then you get that other person. And then you realize that, this person is brilliant, but there's this guy that not only is brilliant, but he has demonstrated capacity in doing the kind of things that you require before. So you can shift position. That's what I mean. That it should be a little like a jigsaw puzzle. It will be more difficult because you may say, yes, ordinarily I would want this person to be here. But because he cannot be here, if I give this position to another geopolitical zone, that geopolitical zone may lose that other position I wanted to give to them to another one. So it becomes a rather complex process. And most of our people generally, and especially our leaders, are mentally lazy. So they don't want to get involved in processes that are mentally tasking, that are rigorous and mentally tasking. So if we are going to retain both competence and a reflection of our diversity, it means we have to be very, very thorough in searching out people who may not even be interested in appointments, who may not trust politicians, and persuade them to do the work. But I believe sincerely that every geopolitical area has competent persons in different areas, maybe not in all areas. If we are looking for the very best, we have to find them in different areas and find a way to balance the equation. But unfortunately, because politicians are more interested in patronage, by the time you look at the effect of patronage, the effect of tribalism, the effect of nepotism, the effect of corruption, it becomes practically impossible to do any balancing at all. But if we want to do it properly, we don't have to sacrifice competence on the altar of federal character. No, we can balance the two very well, but it will be a very rigorous and mentally taxing exercise. And most people don't want to do that kind of work, especially when it will now affect. We don't even have the mindset required to make proper appointments. We don't place merit above every other thing. We don't look at the outcomes. We don't say, oh, we were elected to serve the people and improve their lot. No, and that's where it begins. I always go back to motive. If the motive of the person was to win election for personal reasons other than service, then the person really doesn't care about these things we're discussing. The person cares about using the opportunity to strengthen his position, politically speaking and economically speaking, so that he cares to the nation or to the state. The person will be looking to appoint people who are beneficial to him and his ambitions. And that is what we are suffering from presently. We appoint persons who are loyal to us or loyal to people who are loyal to us. So we are looking at building an empire that will last for a long time, political empire, economic empire. We're not looking at serving the state or serving the nation, as it were. And that is why it's difficult for us to make proper appointments. It's not that we can't balance federal character and competence. We can, but it's a more difficult job to do, especially for people whose vision is not to bless the nation.
All right, let's look at the place of compensation in all of this, right? We know that with our political, the kind of politics that we practice, we see a lot of compensations here and there, especially for people who either supported the president while during the process before he assumed office or whatever, whoever the person is, whatever position the person is at. But the point is, we sort of look at compensations a lot. I don't know if we can completely remove that. Do you think it's a bad idea to look at compensations? Because what then would be your goal for or your reason for supporting me? Is it solely because you believe in me, or you would want something else in return? Do you think compensation should be removed?
You cannot entirely remove compensation. It happens all over the world. People compensate people who support them in America, in UK, all over the world. But the question now becomes, what kind of compensation are we talking about? Is the compensation appropriate? There are several ways to compensate a person. When you compensate someone who is not competent with an executive position, when you appoint the person, for instance, to lead a ministry, what you've done is to subject that whole ministry to incompetent leadership. So even when you have stars in that ministry, like permanent secretaries and directors, the incompetent minister will damage all the great work they may be doing. It's like getting a sheep to lead lions. So it's not that we don't have to compensate people who assist us to achieve our vision or ambition. But what is appropriate compensation? They can be appointed to boards where they will be relevant. You can compensate a person and still not damage your leadership by finding a space where that person will be useful and beneficial to your leadership. So the compensation walk away. No. If you are appointed to a board, for instance, you are expected to make contributions at the board meeting. If you are appointed to chair an institution, you're supposed to help the substantive head to perform. It goes back to what I said before about balancing things out. Just like you can balance federal capacity to perform, So you don't go and compensate an illiterate that requires mental acuity. It doesn't work. But it works in Nigeria. People just get appointed to any position at all. So I think that is what we should be thinking about. Must we compensate people? Well, I think that is a fact of life, that people expect to be compensated for hard work. There are some people who may not expect it. They just want to support this candidate for altruistic reasons. Let's not pretend that they are not there. They are there. There are some people who support candidates and spend money on their behalf without even knowing the candidates. When the Labour Party candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, was contesting for presidency, a lot of people who supported him and spent huge amounts of money didn't get to meet him personally. And they didn't care. So they were not expecting anything really. And it will also help our political space when Nigerians get to that point where everything must not be about compensation. Is it natural to compensate people? Yes. Do people do? I mean, if you look at the how Hillary Clinton played a political career. She contested against Obama. She lost the nomination, and she eventually got herself a plum position. Some people don't know that there's a connection between the fact that the Clinton supported Obama and that position. It's a reward. But it's not a reward that damaged America because she held her own in that position. So that's what I'm saying.
Competence was not compromised at all.
Competence was not compromised in the course of rewarding the person who actually wanted the position or the reward. But some people should actually do what they believe in, not necessarily because they want a reward, but because that's what they believe in. We need to get to that point of altruism. Because we have this poverty consciousness, because we have this mentality where everything is about poverty. Even people who are rich do not recognize that they are rich. They keep going on with this primitive acquisition of wealth because they have the poverty consciousness. They're afraid that maybe I'll become poor again if I'm not careful. So let me acquire some more. When you have that kind of mentality, everything becomes about financial reward, position. You need to get to that point where you do what you believe in for a change. I think this man will be a great leader. Let me support him. He doesn't have to know me for me to support him. I think that man will be a bad leader. I think I need to stop him if I can. At least I will not give him my vote, and I will influence others who I have that power to influence not to give votes to him, because I don't want anything from him. Even if he calls me to say, "Oh, Larry, support me," I don't really want to. So we need to be led by our convictions. We're not doing enough of that in Nigeria. Our politics is largely dominated by politics of personal corruption and nepotism and tribalism, and all of those vices are on the increase. We are looking more at what we get out of the system than what we give to the system. In fact, Nigeria is starving and suffering because nobody is feeding Nigeria away from Nigeria. And that is why Nigeria is gradually drying up. And we pretend we are not noticing.
Analysts, investors, people around the world, media, on the direction in which a particular administration is headed. I mean, first impressions really matters the most in governance. Now, this administration, right, were you expecting more politicians or technocrats?
I was basically expecting more technocrats because we actually have a lot of problems. We had a lot of problems when they came to office. We have more problems now. The point I'm making is that with the level of problems we had, I would have expected technocrats. You can't have technocrats throughout, but technocrats and then politicians who have performed before in certain positions. And even if you're going to appoint politicians, make sure that you put them in places where they won't do damage. So if the person is a minister of state, since we choose to have a plethora of ministers, you have a substantive technocrat as minister. Then you can reward him with minister of state. So it's like the junior minister. But the situation where you take a ministry, whatever ministry, and put it in the hands of a person who is obviously incompetent. Now, for me, incompetence is not about just making mistakes or slips. Incompetence is about the fact that you don't have a clue on how to identify the critical issues and address them as the leader. You are a problem solver. You're a visionary when you're a leader. you shouldn't just solve present problems. You have to anticipate stopping future problems from arising. So we don't have such leaders. When we get to that point where we understand the leadership selection process, you find out that we will be more careful about who we appoint to positions. And when we find them, we will now accelerate our development. I spoke about Bangladesh. I think it was yesterday. These countries don't appoint people on the basis of some of these other considerations. That is why they do quantum leaps. That is, every 10 years, 12 years, you look back and you can hardly recognize the country. But in our own case, every 10 years, you can recognize the country, obviously. But it's in reverse. In other words, the country is so bad, you can't recognize it. Not so good, you can't recognize it. And it's worrisome because we are still on the downward spiral. That's the sad part. So I think we need that is when Tinubu came on board, I expected that he should be careful about putting people, especially in key ministries. In fact, every ministry for me is key. As long as you get money, you are important. But some are more important than others. And yes, and having said that, I expected that people who are very competent should be there, and then technocrats should be able to take sway in most of the critical ministries. But that's not what we are seeing now. And even the after all the noise about we hit the ground running, it has become obvious that we are practically running to nowhere, and it's sad. It's sad.
All right. Before we even continue our conversation, you know that you have the opportunity to call 0808 312 8618. 0808 312 8618. What do you think about our conversation this morning? Let's know your 2 cents. Go ahead and let us know about it. You can also send a WhatsApp message to 0700 010 961 961 0700 010 961 961. We have a message here. It says, "Good morning, VOP team. We are happy to have our voice now. You guys are doing a great job listening to you guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much." It says, "Listening to Mr. Larry, I was tempted to believe that a woman would take Nigeria to the promised land, but then I remember Betta Edu, a former speaker, Ete, and former Buhari humanitarian minister, Desiani, etc. I now settled for God sent to deliver this nation. My name is Idoko from Guaremba." Mr. Larry, what do you think about this?
Wasn't when I was talking about Okonjo-Iweala and Akpela, I wasn't looking at gender. I was just looking at people who did well. Of course, you know there's this thing I say sometimes. Don't quote me, but I've always said that women either do very well or very badly. They don't have in between.
There's no middle ground.
So they don't do middle ground. They just do either very well or very badly.
Well,
so what I think we should do is to look out for women who can do very well, and you'll be surprised how well they can do. Look at what the woman is doing at World Trade Organization again. I mean, some people are just wired to do well. And one thing with women is that they are generally, on a general note, more committed than men. Maybe because of the motherhood syndrome. People have ascribed it to different things. In a regular office, women are more loyal and committed than men. In governance, they just seem to want to nurture, to protect. Of course, there are aberrations, I know. We shouldn't pretend that all women are Okonjo-Iweala. No, they are not. But the truth is that, men, we have a lot of baggages. So, you have to fend for yourself, family, in-law. Then some people have branches you don't want to mention on radio. All of those things put pressure on the person. And it makes a lot of men fail. So I creative contribution he made there. Very creative contribution. Captures a lot in just one sentence.
One sentence. I mean, at this point in time, we have to also look at a lot of other men, because when we're talking about Tinubu's cabinet, you can't take out some that are doing well generally out of others? For example, Enrique is someone that you will most definitely talk about in terms of his doings, for lack of a better word. Do you think he's doing well?
Um, you see, for me, you cannot say someone is doing well in isolation. I've said that up to a million
Mm,
times
mm,
here. They call Wike Mr. Project. So we can say that he's doing well with projects. But you see, there is more to leadership than projects. So if you want Nigeria to have good leaders, you must get leaders to understand that we are looking at their performance across the board, not just construction of roads. Why do I say that? Because when you look at the much touted Wike performance, it's basically about construction and construction, the same Mr. Project phenomenon. And what are we constructing? Mainly roads. Now, let me ask you a question. There's a major problem in FCT. Nobody ever sat down to ask the simple question: where would the low-income civil servants live
leave. Mm.
to work in the city center? That's a very serious problem. And you notice that Omahi, who didn't know about that problem, went and decided to talk about people coming to work late. And you saw what he got back in return. You cannot exclude me from living where I can come to work in time. That is, you make it impossible for me to live inside the FCT. So I live in another state sometimes, and I commute to FCT. And then I come to work by 9:30. And you say that I don't come to work in time. So are we addressing some of those problems? These are very important questions. One of these capital cities in the world that doesn't have a bus system at all is Abuja. So Abuja was assumed to be a capital city for politicians. It was built by military generals, apparently for military generals. They didn't consider that you should have bus routes. I mean, the most prosperous cities in the world have train and bus routes. Then Nigeria, that is struggling with poverty, we don't have buses that can. And you are not addressing some of these critical problems openly. And they're not rocket science to address. It doesn't take 1 year to create a bus system, create a bus stops, beautiful bus stops, ensure that it doesn't become the home of miscreants. That is, look at what I call holistic problem solving, so that people will give a sigh of relief and say, hey, well, this makes more sense. The money you use to construct one major road can change the transport system in terms of busing in Abuja. But because we don't like thinking, we don't like thinking about our problems and solutions, we just hail anybody who controls more roads and makes a lot of noise as a great leader. Leadership is not about noise making and construction of roads. While roads are important, they're not the only thing we need in Nigeria. You know, governors and our politicians have reduced everything to road construction. That's why we are still discussing the coastal road. We discuss east west every time, road. And airport. And I can tell you also, I don't want to emphasize that. I didn't want to go there
Mr.
before.
Larry, roads
But
are
maybe one day
important
I will tell you
now.
why they construct roads.
Roads are
So I think we
important.
need talking about, let me go back to summarize the answer of the question you asked me. Wike is doing well in terms of commissioning and running with a few projects that will improve access to places in Abuja and all of that. But if you want to look at holistic leadership, empowerment of young people, we still have poor miscreants in Abuja. We have all kinds of, we don't have a holistic program that is going to turn Abuja into the capital of our dreams. I cannot see it yet. So he's still Mr. Project. But in my opinion, he has to do much more for him to get a high rating from me as a performer.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Larry. I think we've gone through every single question that I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time. We absolutely appreciate you.
I thank you for having this conversation. I know some people will be wondering, so when will this man find somebody to really give a pass mark? Remember, I gave a conjugal a pass mark. So, so
Yes.
we shouldn't forget that. And not only that, I praise her, not because I think she did well. And most, even her enemies actually acknowledge that she did well. That's I don't even the corrupt politicians acknowledge that she did well. And we need to get to that point where we hold our leaders accountable to high performance standards so that we don't begin to adjust our expectations to meet their incompetence. If we do that, which is what we are doing, what will happen is that we will remain washed out and incompetent and non-performing nation. And that's not what we want for ourselves. And I hope that they and the people, the politicians and people are listening to the voice of the people.
All
That's
right.
the fastest way for us to make a difference. Do have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too, Mr. Larry. All right. It's been a fun conversation with Mr. Larry concerning this issue of competence in terms of political appointments, competence, compensation, or federal character, which should even be considered for a president to get someone as an appointee, which should be considered. There's been a lot when it comes to different people who have been appointed. There's been a lot of cabinet members for the past years who go unnoticed, who do underwhelmingly poor. They do underwhelmingly poor. We see different political cabinet members who do different things in different ways, and they're either underwhelming or just meh. And then there are others who actually we give kudos to, and maybe that's what a lot of people were expecting with this particular administration, especially in the build up to the presidential elections February last year, where there were lots of conversations about the president appointing technocrats, and what we saw after that was a list of more politicians in the appointment than technocrats. I mean, when a lot of people were asking questions, they were like, "Do we not have other people? The politicians, are they not? Do they not have professions?" Do they not have professions? Some of them are doctors, some of them are engineers. Do they not have other things aside from politics? So why then do they have to force themselves to continually be in our faces and then still do underwhelmingly poorly? Well, we hope that we see a change in the way things are at the moment. We'll take a okay, no, we're not taking a break. This is where we wrap up the show this morning. Coming up next is Ogindigbo. Make sure